Over now.
All right, recording's in progress, so I'm going to start over. Yeah, I will start with an overview of tonight's program. This evening, we're going to spend our entire time as a full group, and the focus of our work is really going to, and our discussion is really aimed to discern how we would like to act together going forward. And so we'll have a number of sections to talk about that. We will have some discussion about chapter 10 before we get to that part. And we have a proposal for you as to how, a suggestion as to how we will act together. And then we will close up with just some announcements of next week's optional session. And I'll close us out. So for tonight's spiritual grounding, which will be a special treat for everyone, we invite Allison Wiley to share her original song.
Oh, thank you. I'm typing right now the lyrics into the chat. It's a short song, and I'll say the lyrics as I send them out to you all. Seek me. This is based on Amos. Seek me and live is what God said. Establish justice in the gate. The pain of poverty must not go down to the sons and daughters. God calls us to let justice roll down like water. So I'm going to sing it. I wrote this. One sec. Okay, so now you have these very simple lyrics, and it just repeats. The background to this song, I wrote it in spring of 2018, and I had just discovered EcoFaith, where I met Scott, Janet, Lauren, and we were working on the Portland Clean Energy Fund initiative, which is all about social justice. And we worked together, lots and lots of people. There were hundreds of us who were gathering signatures. And then we got it onto the ballot. And then we were door knocking, convincing people to vote for it. It passed in 2018, autumn, with 64% of the vote. And tens of millions of dollars have been going out to communities of color for climate justice. And it was rewarding. It was meaningful. And I was getting steeped, in this social justice. But maybe like many of us in the room, there's been periods of my life where I've been really engaged with social justice, and then periods of life where not so much. This Lenten study, and I've been grateful to be a part of it with all of you, it has gotten me regrounded in the complete moral necessity of social justice. Seek me and key of A, here we go. Seek me and live is what God said. Establish justice in the gate. The pain of poverty must not go down to the sons and daughters. God calls us to let justice roll down like water. Seek me and live is what God said. Establish justice in the gate. The pain of poverty must not go down to the sons and daughters. God calls us to let justice roll down like water. Now, if you'd like to sing along with me, you're all on mute. Don't be shy. Let's do this together. Seek me and live is what God said. establish justice in the gate. The pain of poverty must not go down to the sons and daughters. God calls us to let justice roll down like water. That's my song. May God bless this gathering.
Woohoo! Thank you, Allison. May our work together enable justice to roll down like water. So Eco-Faith Recovery convened this book study group with several goals in mind. We would certainly wish to raise awareness about the Doctrine of Discovery's historical and current impacts on Indigenous peoples. We wanted to do this learning in a relational way so that we mentor each other along the way. Our third goal, and perhaps our most important, is to find one or more collective actions we can take to continue our work together. We'll focus tonight's session on discerning what actions we can take. Eco-Faith Recovery's Practice 5 encourages us to act together. I'll read the headline of Practice 5 now. Practice 5, act together. Consciously engage the power of collective action in the service of the Holy One's healing and justice-seeking work for human communities and the whole creation. I found Practice 5 to be very important in my climate work, in my climate justice work. I'm way more likely to actually follow through on an action when acting together, since I feel accountable to others. I have a great story I can share, but I want to take that was actually during PSEF, that the PSEF campaign, as Allison referenced, but I won't take time for that today. Acting together provides me other perspectives along the way and helps me sustain the work through challenges and disappointments. It's just plain more fun too. Sarah Augustine invites us to act together throughout the book. One example is in chapter 8 at the bottom of page 182. These are all assets I can mobilize to resist the systems of oppression that threaten my people, Indigenous and vulnerable peoples everywhere. These assets, when joined together with hundreds or thousands of communities of faith, are enough to reshape reality. Yet the radical nature of her call to fundamentally change the structure of our systems and ways of life is challenging and daunting. Acting together and doing this book study with all of you enables me to avoid becoming overwhelmed. So it's my desire that we can find a way to act together at the conclusion of this book study, so we continue our work, so that we're more likely to continue this work, and that we're able to sustain this challenging and difficult work as we go forward through enabling justice to flow down like water. Janet, I'm going to turn it over to you. You want to talk about an item in the book. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, so I loved it when Scott brought up Practice 5, Eco-Faith's Practice 5, Act Together. And what immediately struck me when he said he wanted to talk about this tonight was that it relates very well to what Augustine says about the distinction between individual sin and structural sin. And so she makes a point of that throughout the book. And I'm wondering if any of you could take a crack at telling everyone how you understand that distinction. What is structural sin versus individual sin? And just raise your hand if you are willing to take a stab at that, answering that question. I'm sure somebody can. Okay, Lauren.
Structural sin, to me, if what I heard her saying is sin that happens because of the way the system works. So, for example, if your 401k is investing in mining companies and it's helping you personally be financially secure, but it's also harming the people in Suriname, you're engaging in structural sin. And the other piece of structural sin is it's really hard to get out of. That the system doesn't allow you. It's not as easy as just saying, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Right.
That just by being part of our system, you are part of structural sin.
That's perfect. That's a great definition. And so then I just to drive that home, I'm going to read a few words of Sarah Augustin's from page 212. I just thought this was such a good synopsis. She says, although I know each one of us reading this book tries to be a good person, the truth is we are ensnared in sinful global systems that cause great suffering that is completely hidden to most of us most of the time. This is structural sin, not the sin of an individual, but the sin of a system. And it is by far the most prevalent sin in which we participate. And then a little below that, she says, structural sin is sin that inhabits our lives by virtue of the policies, practices, institutions, and assumptions that shape how we live. It's sin so baked into the system, so much a part of how things are, that it is largely hidden, unseen, except by those suffering from it. So, and then related to that, and this is going to move us into our action workshop piece. At the beginning of chapter 10, you might have noticed she starts by saying, this chapter is about what you can do. And then she says, let me rephrase that. This chapter is about what we can do. I want to be very clear that dismantling the doctrine of discovery is not something that one person does. So that's why we're going to be talking for the rest of our time together about collective action, what we can do for the most part. We're going to have a little FYI on something you could do as an individual, but for the most part, we want to talk about collective action. And Scott has put together a super helpful slide that really summarizes some of the ideas that Sarah Augustin put forward. So we're going to talk about those ideas and what you gleaned from the book for about the next 13 minutes. And then we're going to get into a proposal of some possibilities for how we might work together. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me get this over in the right location. Okay. Okay, can everybody see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hopefully if your gallery view of the people is in the way of seeing all the words, hopefully you know how to move that. You just put your cursor at the top of the line of pictures windows and move it. You could move it over to the picture on the left so that you can see all the words on the right. But here's what we've got that Sarah Augustin, these are the ideas that she provided. First of all, she talked a lot about sharing power, right? And one way to share power is to transfer an asset, for example, an investment in an oil stock or maybe a mutual fund that has a lot of heavy and extractive industries. Or you could transfer that directly to ownership of people impacted by structural sin and by that asset, by the extractive industries. Or you could transfer the profit from that asset to the people impacted by this, these industries. And we're going to talk about one way that you can work with money a little bit later about how to decolonize your wealth. Second one is restorative justice, which moves beyond financial compensation. And she talked about this in, I think it was, I'm trying to remember if it was chapter 8 or 9, was one of those. It wasn't chapter 10, but she talked about how restorative justice moves beyond financial compensation and involves repentance and becoming, remember, she talks about entanglement, mutual entanglement, like actually getting connected with people that are impacted by these structures that we participate in that are sinful, and as a form of repentance, and also, again, shared, well, we were talking before about sharing financial power, but also shared risk. And she gave some ideas for how to do that. Another one, which we'll be talking about some more tonight, is to join the Coalition for the Dismantling of the Doctrine of Discovery. And I'll show you, I'll give you a little tour of some aspects of that website later. And then direct peacemaking. This I thought was really exciting. Talking about getting, for example, a church body that you're involved in, the Lutheran Church or the UCC denomination. Maybe it's a pension fund that is through a church body like Thrivent. The many might know about Thrivent, and getting them to put direct pressure on corporations and to ask them to negotiate directly with the community that they're harming. She gave some great examples of that. And then there's changing the structures. She gave some examples for that as well. Advocating for U.S. law to enact the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Another one could be having corporations that are U.S. corporations pass a law that they have to abide by U.S. law when they're working offshore, not just the lax laws of the country they're in, but U.S. environmental regulations, U.S. labor regulations. And she gave some other examples there. And then she talked about working for legislation that protects human rights and the environment, and that's another way to change the structures. And so I'm going to stop sharing now and just ask for you all, if you would like, we have a few minutes to talk about some of these suggestions that she gave. And I'm wondering if there were any that you found particularly inspiring or exciting. And is there anything she suggested that you might be moved to want to try or bring to your church community? Yeah, Bernadetta.
One thing I've been thinking about as I was reading that, and since then, and like right now, is why are not the indigenous folks who are living on the land involved in the decision-making of the extractive mining that is going on, as the example that was in one of the film that was sent out last week, I think, or the week before. And I'm thinking, why aren't they involved in it? Why is it just, okay, this mining corporation can go and mine there, but none of the people who are really living there are even given a chance to know what's coming until it's there.
Right. That's a great point. That's a great point. And, clearly she gives story after story of how she and others tried to address that in Suriname. But there's so many cases of that, like the Oak Flat copper mine, proposed copper mine right now. I think it's in Arizona, but yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that question. Other thoughts? Yeah, Carl.
It seems like a lot of the problems are related to the fact that international law and international agreements are basically unenforceable. I mean,
Or unenforced, yeah, definitely.
We have resolutions, but Basically, there's no teeth to them.
Yeah.
And, in the long run, in an ideal world, there would be enforceable international law. But at the moment, there's only individual countries' laws where they can hold their own citizens accountable. And so I was struck by the first two examples in Chapter 10, where US corporations, we could require that they take into account more than just shareholder wealth. Right? Corporations are people, but as
Yes.
people, their only aim is to optimize the wealth of their shareholders, and that's it. There should be more than that. And why couldn't there be laws requiring natural resources, human health, a number of other things are required components of every corporation's operation. And if it's a U.S. corporation, then we can hold that law. On the second one, I actually brought this up to my men's breakfast group, and they just said, "Oh, good luck with that." The second one is U.S. corporations operating outside the U.S. should be held to U.S. standards. And, it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
But in fact, they go to all these third world countries so they can do whatever the heck they want. But why couldn't we have laws that require them to follow US law, even if they're outside of the US doing whatever they're doing? It seems like things like that at least would allow the US to take the lead in some of these structural changes. Sarah Augustine talks a lot about Canada, and it may be Canada could actually accomplish some of these things before US, being a little more progressive, I think, at least, maybe quick moving, I don't know. But somebody needs to, take the lead and show that things like that, holding corporations to account, can be done and make sense.
Thank you. Yeah, I was very struck by those examples as well. And the fact that it feels maybe impossible right now, or like utopia to think that we could do something like that. But look, there was a time when there were no unions in this country, right? There was a time when child labor was completely legal. There was a time when we had slavery, right? All three of those things, we changed the system, right? There was time when we had slaves, and I mean, if you go back farther. So we have to dream big, and we have to work towards what we want to see in the world. So excellent. And we have time for maybe one or two more people. Thoughts on her suggestions? Neil, I'm gonna go ahead. Yeah, Neil. Are you muted, Neil?
I'm always muted, except when I'm talking on forever. The Northern Tier pipeline is gone through, or supposedly is certainly affecting sacred lands of the indigenous people in northern North Dakota or in the Montana area. I don't know all the specifics, but that is something that somehow the system is letting somebody and everybody run roughshod over sacred lands with no awareness that they have some human rights to have that kind of a territory that they can be protecting. So, that's very close to us. I think so many other things are way out there. I know that hasn't gone well, or it hasn't been settled very well. We certainly could use some action to bolster the indigenous people's rights or their protection of sacred lands.
That's a great example. And there definitely has been some effectiveness to some of those campaigns, at least some things that have been delayed. I think some projects that just haven't come to fruition because of these kinds of efforts. So thank you. And I think Nancy, had you raised your hand?
I did. I had to go back and kind of look at the notes I had taken on this. About 2 years ago, I went to that MACG training, and they had a video about the IAF, the Industrial Areas Foundation Northwest Regional Network.
of community alliances, Washington, Oregon, Montana, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. I'm just bringing it up because that was, then who, I think they wrote the piece for the wrestling thing. I didn't unfortunately get to go to that, and I can't go this time either. But it makes me think people are doing this, and isn't it better to join in with organizations that are already doing this rather than us 4, 8, 12, less than 20 people trying to come up with a new wheel? So I'm kind of curious in how much more has MACG moved? What is Canada doing? Sometimes figuring those places out that seem to be moving, and I think a network. I mean, I think they do certain lobby kind of stuff. So yeah, I was just thinking about that, and thinking that I'm sure there are a lot of organizations that are further along and would love more people to come in and join them.
That is the perfect segue into the next part of our conversation, and we are going to give some examples of some networks and organizations that are working for change that we could get connected to. And you are absolutely right. We need to find the groups and organizations and networks that are doing this work and join them to be the most effective. So that's perfect teeing us up for our next section of our time tonight. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Scott.
Janet, do you want to do your FYI first before I?
Oh, my FYI. Okay.
You do the FYI, and then I will do the grand introduction of the proposal.
Okay. Unfortunately, my browser that had all that stuff in it. Oh, there it is. Okay. I was like, where did it go? Okay. All right. So what I want to show you, let's see. Okay. So one of the things that she talks a lot about is transferring wealth or using our investments in just ways. And for the sake of, you could say, I like to call it reparative giving, or using your giving, your charitable dollars towards reparations, and rebalancing the out of balance system that we're in. And so there's an organization that I found that's doing just that, and it's called the Decolonizing Wealth Project. And within that, the way they organize the money, it's in what they call the Liberated Capital Fund. And so I'm going to share my screen to, here we go. Okay. So here is this Decolonizing Wealth, Liberated Capital. Money is medicine, giving is healing. It's a donor, community, and funding vehicle aimed at moving untethered resources to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities for liberation and racial healing. And you can see they talk about solidarity, not charity, that they move money through a reparations model. And what they do is they have a board of Black, Indigenous, people of color board members that do all the research for you to find good BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color led organizations that are doing amazing things to support their communities. And then they select grantees, and then your money goes into this Liberated Capital Fund, and then grants are given out to these different organizations. And I have found them to be very responsible, and they do a lot of amazing educational programs as well, and healing programs. And as you see here, it says it welcomes membership from individuals at all levels of giving who want to collectively heal the wounds of colonialism and white supremacy by using money as medicine to shape an equitable future. And so the other thing, if I can, I think I have to stop sharing and then start sharing again to show you the other screen I wanted to show you. Wait, hold on a second, sorry. Here we go. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having problems with technology. Just a second.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Okay. Hold on a second here. Here we go. I just wanted to show you their funds, which are exciting. You know, they have a case for reparations fund specifically, where they are working on supporting efforts to advance the whole process of doing reparations in the U.S. And then they have an Indigenous Earth Fund, a Food and Land Justice Fund, a National Truth and Healing Fund, a California Truth and Healing Fund, which you probably wouldn't only do if you were in California. But so you get the sense here of the scope of what they're doing. And that's just been something I found as a way that Robin and I use as a vehicle for transferring wealth, transferring dollars to these worthy organizations that are changing, making structural change. Another example, and let me see if I can find the right one. Here we go. We're going to talk about the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery a little more in a minute, but I wanted you to see that if you join as a sustaining donor, 60% goes to an Indigenous repair partner, and then they keep 40% for themselves. I think if I remember that correctly, I think it's 60% goes to the Indigenous partner and 40% is kept for the work of the coalition, but they're also doing the work, right, of dismantling the doctrine of discovery. So those are just two examples of how you can do something as an individual and a family. And that's just an FYI for you. And then we're going to move on to thinking about our collective action next. And Scott's going to take that up.
Thank you, Janet. I really appreciate you bringing the decolonized wealth, liberated capital to my attention. You know, we're all getting a really big kicker this year. It's 45%. It's huge. Mine's got 4 figures in it. Maybe many of yours does as well. I'm going to take a piece of that and put it to the Decolonized Wealth Project. So I encourage others to consider donating your kicker to a cause or causes. Given that it's, to me, it's like, I call it found money. I didn't expect it. It just found money. Thank you, Janet. Well, the author calls us to act collectively with our communities. Nancy very wisely points out that it thinks it's going to be far more effective if we connect with other organizations as opposed to trying to act as a small group or individually. So the author calls us to act with our communities, our denominations, or with other networks in order to have greater power. And Eco-Faith Recovery, as I mentioned, takes seriously the necessity to act together to repair harms. In addition, all of Eco-Faith Recovery's work is grounded in relationship as Eco-Faith Recovery's practice too. So we have a proposal for acting together that is grounded in developing relationships. Our proposal has 3 parts, and we're calling each part an invitation. We'll have a short presentation describing each invitation, where we ask that any questions be only for clarification. After all of the presentations, we'll discuss the invitations more fully in the context of the entire proposal. And at the end, we'll take a poll to gauge interest in each of the invitations in order to determine our next steps. So the 3 invitations are, number 1, participate in this coming April, the MACG Wrestling with the Truth of Colonization, with MACG coming up starting April 4th. Number 2, invitation number 2, develop relationships with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And the focus of that one will be relationship development as well as acting together. And number 3, we've said join the coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. And the objective of that is ongoing organizing and acting together. So I will start with the presentations. Invitation 1 is to participate in MACG's Wrestling with the Truth of Colonization. I have taken that course, that class previously. Very, very impactful, really a very rich program put together by, as Nancy mentioned, IAN, IAF, IAF, IAFNW, and put together by indigenous peoples to bring to people like me, white colonist settlers, so that I learn about the impact of the doctrine of discovery and U.S. policies on indigenous peoples. And much like the book, really stressing that it's still active today. So if you are to join that, it starts, as I said, April 4th, which is a Thursday. There is actually an introductory briefing, which you're required to attend. It's a 30 minutes. First one is April 1st at noon. The second one is April 2nd at 6 p.m. And then there are 5 Zoom sessions, April 4th, 9th, 11th, 16th, and 18th, alternate Thursdays and Tuesdays during the first half of April. I'll put this information in the chat. We'll put it in a follow-up email, and all the sessions are Zoom, and I'll put the registration link in the chat as well. And I'll now turn it over to Robin to talk about
Scott?
relationship. Yeah.
Before you do that, I'm sorry, I might have spaced, but did you say something about how that will allow people to build a relationship with NAIA?
Thank you. I forgot. Thank you for, yes, as part of that program, there will be an opportunity to build relationships with NAIA. Tana Sanchez, Representative Tana Sanchez, will actually be presenting during the Wrestling with the Truth program. She is a member, an elder, and really a wise elder at NAIA, really well-respected elder at NAIA as well. So yeah, great opportunity here to just participate in that program, and also to have an opportunity to develop relationships with the NAIA organization. There are other ways to develop relationships with NAIA as well. You go to the website and you can see various opportunities to volunteer there. I intend to start volunteering on garden days on Mondays. So those of you who are free, welcome to volunteer at garden days at NAIA as well. So any clarifying questions before I turn it over to Robin to talk about relationships with the Grand Ronde? Nancy, a clarifying question.
It is my understanding that MACG program, you have to be at each one.
Yeah, they request, yes, that you attend every session. Yes, correct. Yep. Carl, clarifying question.
Oh, Scott, did you mention the cost basis on that?
I didn't, but
if you're a member of a MACG organization, so for everybody that's at Spirit of Grace and St. Andrew, at least, you could join for free. If you're not a member of a MACG member organization, then there's a cost, but there can be a sliding scale. So.
Carl, clarifying question.
I just wanted to know what MACG is.
Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good.
Thank you.
And you're going to put a link to the wrestling.
I will put this information in the chat so it's available, and it'll be in the follow-up email as well.
Great. And
Okay.
MACG is the Portland IAF organization, Portland-based IAF organization.
Pastor Robin, would you like to invite us into relationship development with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde?
Happy to. Happy to be in deeper relationship myself. Back in 2016, I had the opportunity to have a sabbatical and got to travel to Grand Ronde a few times and to build some relationships with some of the folks who were in their culture division there. And because I wanted to get to know the First Peoples on whose land I live, which is, as I think many of us here in Washington County know, that Washington County and down into the Willamette Valley, it was Kalapuya land, which is now part of the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And so one of the things I was interested in is some ongoing relationship potentially between the congregation I was then serving and Grand Ronde. And one of the things I discovered in the conversations was, wow, they're really busy. And gosh, they've got a lot of needs just taking care of their own people. And then trying to respond to all of these settler folks who are trying to, increase our consciousness. That takes a lot of extra energy too. And so when I asked them if they might be willing to, do presentation, have some conversation with the community I was then serving, they said, well, if you can bring folks here, because the last couple of years, we were doing a lot of that. We were traveling all over the place. We were doing presentations, and we really were neglecting our own people and the needs that we had to develop our own community. And so we're not doing that so much now, but come here and we can see what we can do. You can tour the museum. Maybe we could build more of a relationship then. And then I said, well, what else in the meantime, could I be doing? And they said, well, here's some book references, which I can pass on to any of you who might like those if you haven't gotten those from me before. And how about subscribing to our newspaper? You could learn a lot about us from the newspaper. Like Nina, you're the expert here. You could tell us a lot of other ideas, perhaps, since you're also an enrolled member. And I did that, and I found it super helpful. I'm not sure they're doing new print subscriptions anymore, but you can go to the website for Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and you can sign up to receive email updates. There's also a Facebook page, and if you like on the Facebook page, then you'll get notifications when there's something going on that may be of interest. And you'll also see things that you're invited to participate in. Some things are more really for tribal members, but a lot of things are open to others. So with the Spirit of Grace getting more serious, we've been doing land acknowledgement for quite a while, and Don Mangeli in this group here has been really passionate about helping organize us to take our land acknowledgement to a deeper level. It's one thing to say whose tribes we are and to acknowledge our complicity with these decisions that were historically made and how we continue to benefit. It's another thing to say, okay, what are we going to do about it? And Don has been passionate about, well, can we mix up our land acknowledgements so people don't just kind of tune out when we do the same one over and over again? And how do we take our land acknowledgements to the next step? In our last session, you heard Don recommending Steph Littlebird's presentation on this, and I know Don is interested in bringing her to Spirit of Grace as well. So I'm wanting to re-engage with leaders from Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Have already mentioned this to Nina, and she's given some input as well. Reconnect with some of the leaders I was connected with before, but I would love to know who is interested in this, what communities in particular. And I think it's a more powerful invitation than to say, we have a number of communities that are on your land and we together are interested in going the next step with our land acknowledgement. Oh, and by the way, we'd like to even check out what we're even saying in the land acknowledgements and, make sure that seems appropriate to you, but find out what you're trying to pursue. What are your primary interests? Because we're interested in doing more, but we'd like that to be aligned with what you would like to see happen, not just some book we read, but what you, the First Peoples on the land we're on, are really interested in promoting. If I could just do a quick screen share for those of you who are on Grand Ronde land, the website has so much information. They've really given a ton. There's also a Chinook Wawa language app that the Grand Ronde has created. You can download and start practicing some of the language, learning some of the words of Chinook Wawa. But there's curriculum on here for like all levels of kids and adults. And here, under the history and culture tab is the removing the consent decree. And so already even on the website, there's information about, hey, this is what we're interested in. You see, there was this whole thing that happened. In order to get some of our land back in 1985, we had to give up all of these things, and it wasn't really fair. And our two senators, Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, have introduced a Senate Bill 3126, which would give the tribe the opportunity to review the consent decree and work with the state of Oregon to modernize its hunting and fishing rights, because they lost a lot of hunting and fishing rights in this effort to be federally recognized once again, because they hadn't been for many decades. That was taken away from them. And so they're inviting us to join the movement right here. So sometimes the tribes themselves are already telling us what they're interested in. We just need to do a little bit of looking at where they're posting these things. And I'll put this link into the chat, so those of you who would like to sign that can, and then you'll probably get some emails. But I would love to know, the invitation here is for those of you who are on Grand Ronde land, might you or your communities be interested in this, so that as I reestablish this connection, I have a sense of like how many communities we could do this with, and EcoFaith is happy to help promote this through the EcoFaith network as well.
Thank you, Robin. Nina, anything you'd like to add to just about developing relationships and the importance of that with the Grand Ronde tribe? Okay if you want to, and okay if you don't.
I think it's a great idea. I love it.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any clarifying questions before we hear about the third invitation? Okay, Janet, looks like not.
Okay, great. So yes, the third invitation is, in fact, to join the coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery. So I'm going to screen share here again. Gonna try. Hold on a second. I don't know why this is doing this. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right. What I specifically want to talk with you about, I recommend that you go to the website that I put in the chat a little earlier, dismantlediscovery.org, to look at all the whole website on the coalition. As I mentioned, there was the opportunity to become a sustaining donor. They also invite you to consider joining a committee as an individual. They have some committees, and one of them is specifically on one of them is specifically on structural change. And they have one on culture and different things. So you could join one of their committees, but when we're talking about collective action, we wanted to highlight this repair network, which is pretty exciting. They are inviting congregations and communities to join this repair network, which is a network of church communities that works with the coalition in education, solidarity, and reparative action alongside Indigenous peoples. Here's the map of existing communities across the U.S. Those already joined, and the purple are in process. So they're still building, as you can tell. It's not everywhere. And another thing that is important to probably acknowledge is that so far, from what I can see on that map, It's basically mostly Mennonite churches because it was a Mennonite initially and a Mennonite initiative. But it's clear to me from this book that they're really welcoming and wanting people outside the Mennonite tradition to join them. So I'm sure churches that aren't Mennonite could. And then, so you see that there are 7 steps of action below, which I'll show you in a minute, that your repair network would involve. And then they have 4 Zoom meetings a year that you would send representatives to. You would have the other optional opportunities like monthly prayer and action hours, and just basically engage. It's a way to engage your congregation or your community in the work of the coalition. Here are the 7 steps that they invite you to commit to. And I'm not going to read all the fine print, but education and lament, organize a committee or a team, and either adopt or draft your own repudiation statement of the doctrine of discovery and send representatives to the quarterly calls. Truth telling, which has to do with the land acknowledgement statement and other things, other options as well. Restitution in the budget. So here we're talking about money and doing some direct returning of wealth to Indigenous groups. And it could be through the coalition's sustaining donor program or another way. Respond to calls for solidarity with Indigenous peoples, connect the work of repair with creation care, and commit to being contagious, sharing your stories and inviting others to join. So that's just a really quick overview of one way that we could work collectively within our faith communities, or perhaps EcoFaith could join and become a part of the coalition's work itself. And that is a very direct way to continue this work on dismantling the doctrine of discovery. So I think that was all I was going to say on that, right, Scott? I think we're ready for our discernment conversation.
Any clarifying questions for Janet before we move on to talk about the proposal as a whole? All right. So I think I'll open the floor for discussion about the proposal as a whole, to kind of adopt these 3 planks, I'll call them, invitations, as our collective commitment to move forward in this work. Any thoughts, comments, revisions?
And we don't necessarily expect you to commit to all 3. I think it's, but these are the options on the table, and we'd like to gauge your interest in moving forward with any or all of these actions that you might want to do either through EcoFaith or with your community.
Nancy, if I could put you on the spot, you suggested potentially connecting with IAFNW. And potentially that's an alternative to the coalition for the dismantling the doctrine of discovery. I don't know. The benefit there that would be that it seems to be a more local organization, regional at least. Would you be willing to look into potential collaboration with them?
With the IAF?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can look back at that. I was really looking forward to doing the wrestling because I know a lot of people on this screen have already done it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it last time, and I can't, I'm on a plane on the 9th, right at the time they have it, so I can't do it. Which I get it, you know, you want to build the relationship and you don't want to miss anything, but you know, I know MacG showed a really good video way back, and they've just done so much work on it already. And you know, I think again, why just start another wheel? And if it's more local to this region of the country rather than, that's kind of my take. I like getting.
Yeah.
So
in.
just to clarify, Scott, so the Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good for you and for everybody, MACG is our local affiliate. Then there's
Okay.
the regional is the Industrial Areas Foundation Northwest, IAF Northwest, and that's all part of the National Industrial Areas Foundation. And it's organizing for not only communities of faith, but you get labor unions and health equity circles, and the teachers unions can all be members. And it's a way of trying to advance the common good. They're grounded in relationality. You start every meeting with a one-to-one conversation with somebody, and out of the developing of those relationships within your own institution and across institutions, the needs are surfaced that they then decide to organize around. So there's issues, and then they will identify a problem first, then cut an issue, and then go into action around trying to make a difference in that arena. And to Nancy's point, then you're looking at, you know, not just a handful of people, you've now got multiple people in many organizations within a metropolitan area, but then you can also go into action regionally with, if you get consensus from other affiliates that you want to act together on something. And so you can just mobilize a lot of people or a lot of money or a lot of time or a lot of pressure on an elected leader, or frankly, a corporate leader as well.
You know, my question for those of you that took the wrestling with colonization, so then was there a next step? Were you then kind of funneled into, so this would be the next step? Was that this, you know, doing a book group, or did that just come up through EcoFaith? Or I'm still trying to figure, you know, how it all comes together.
So yes, my next step was to develop a relationship with NAIA, which, you know, I am embarrassed to say I've been terribly slow at, but it's still there, right? And it's something I'm moving forward on. So yes, there are actions there, and this one will include actions as well. This book study and this book study was independent. Pastor Robin.
Yeah, the NAIA connection has been the primary one. Just to be transparent, there were a number of things that were not expected that arose for Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good that caused the follow through to not be as strong as what was intended. And so one of those things was the resignation of the director of Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good, a brand new person. That was not expected. And then the executive director of NAIA, who had been very invested in building this relationship between MACG and NAIA, took a job as executive director of Cascade AIDS Project, which is another great organization, but now that momentum got lost on the NAIA side as well. So I anticipate after this next round of wrestling with the truth of colonization that will take off more, that relationship. And I think Pastor Solveig Nielsen Gooden, who is also one of our primary EcoFaith leaders, is the primary person from Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good who has a contract now to help lead this. So I anticipate the follow through will be much stronger after this particular session, and that people even who haven't gone through wrestling with the truth of colonization could go ahead and be part of the effort to build the relationship with NAIA, even if they haven't done that course yet.
Oh, and Solveig also mentioned to us, which I can't remember if this was stated or not, that NAIA itself on their website has invitations to volunteer. And of course, you can also attend some of their events. And so there are also ways to pursue developing a relationship with NAIA, even if you can't do wrestling with the truth of colonization. What about the other two ideas? What do you all think about those, or any questions or thoughts? Yes, Yavka.
Hi, thanks. I feel like I've been really quiet this session, but I'm trying to get back into it. First of all, I want to thank you for having some concrete things that we can work on. I think that's really helpful. I appreciate all the comments, especially Nancy, your comment of investing energy of things that are already underway really rings true for me as well. I myself have taken the wrestling course, and just to state, I'm not an official representative of them, but I think if you can take all the classes but would miss one, you might still really benefit from signing up. But that's my informal advice to you, Nancy. I would think you would still get a lot out of it. So I've taken that offering already. I am really interested in all three, but I think if I had to pick one, I would pick the second one, the developing a relationship with the Grand Ronde. We've actually talked about that informally a couple of times with people at Spirit of Grace. And I think that is something that I myself am really curious about. I know there's several in our congregation who are, and I would be very happy to kind of, spend a little bit of time doing that along with hopefully others. So just there's a lot to do. I think it is important so that we don't feel completely overwhelmed to not do everything all at once. But I'm really in favor of developing a stronger relationship with Grand Ronde, and happy to participate in that. Just wanted to mention that to you all.
Thank you. Bonnie, I see your hand raised. And then Allison.
Yes, I've been wanting to be involved in developing a relationship with Grand Ronde also for a couple of years. And I would be interested in doing that and then seeing what that leads to and what we do beyond that. I'm thinking farther into the future.
Awesome. Fantastic. Allison.
Hi. So I, like others, have appreciated that we've been invited into some curated, really well thought through paths of action. I think that's really positive. It's been challenging to me that we have not had any small group tonight. And what happens for me, and it's kind of a lifelong thing, when I'm involved with something, if I find myself in a passive role, and sometimes in eco-faith, we've jokingly used the term sit and get. If I find myself passive, I find myself distant and less involved. And I read the material and I had lots of notes on the material, and there was so much there, and it's so intense. And it's been hard for me to be silent during this session. So I wanted to just give that feedback.
Well, thank you. Scott, I'll let you respond too. I totally hear where you're coming from, and we probably should have done this over two sessions. One to fully discuss and give opportunity for breakout groups on the material, and then the second for presenting ideas for collective action. So I think the fact that we were trying to do all this in one session, we kind of thought we had to sacrifice the breakout groups, but maybe that wasn't the right option for you. And I hear that. Thanks for your feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that feedback, Allison. I appreciate it. Lesson learned for next time. Should we do this again?
Yes.
I mean, there may be a range of things, because on the other hand, I get really disappointed when I go to a whole thing and there's all these opportunities, but there wasn't time to actually talk about what are we actually going to do as next steps. For me, that's harder. So I'd say a larger evaluation, and you probably get different people who have different thoughts on that. But I'm, grateful always for people's feedback as well.
Thanks. Other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I think we're getting close to time to wrap. So I did want to take the opportunity to take the time now just to get gets hands raised on who would like to pursue invitation. We're going to let you do invitation number one. It's up to you. Strongly recommend you go ahead and enroll in Wrestling with the Truth of Colonization if you haven't already taken that class, and if you're able to do so. But I'd like, as Pastor Robin said, we'd like to get a sense of how many people here are interested in establishing a relationship with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde? So I would ask that you raise your hand if you are. Can you count, Janet?
Okay, 1, 2,
One,
3, 4, 5. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
You got 12.
At least 12.
Yep.
I might have missed one.
And as far as invitation number 3, joining the coalition to dismantle the doctrine of discovery, folks particularly interested in that. Okay, it looks like not.
No takers? Carl,
Oh, Carl.
you want to say something, Carl?
This seemed to be one that almost required collective action. We could become and we were virtually all the others seem to me could be things we could bring back to our community and recommend them for individuals to get involved with. Everything from going to the wrestling series to decolonizing wealth fund and some of the other options. You know, I intend to kind of put that in our e-news so people know that these things exist and can follow up. But the thing that really required collective action the most, I think, was actually joining and trying to become a repair network within the dismantling doctrine of discovery.
Yeah, fair
Is that
statement.
what'd you say, Scott?
I think that's a good point. I do see us acting together in establishing relationships with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I do see that being a collective action as well.
Carl, would you be interested in bringing this to Lake Oswego, joining the coalition as a possibility? Do you think?
I could. I would start with our Earth Justice team, probably.
Yeah.
And they respond.
Cool. And I actually should have raised my hand because I actually am interested in getting involved with the coalition. So I'll put myself down too. Jen or Derry.
I was wondering, maybe to focus our work with the Grand Ronde, that we borrow the 7 steps in the Dismantling Discovery Repair Network as a way to guide our work. You know, I was looking through that, there's some places where we would have to, focus maybe using some different language, but I could see that as a really that would really stretch us in some really good ways and leverage the work that has been put forth by that network.
Yeah. I'm going to be bold and just say that I would maybe challenge the folks that are going to be working on developing the relationship with the Grand Ronde to consider just exploring what it would mean to be part of that repair network, because I just think that might really give you some additional resources, structure, and equip you if you got involved with that and went to their 4 Zoom sessions during the year and had that sort of support. But this just an idea that it could be a supportive move. All right. Any last words on these collective actions? Anybody wants to say? Well, thank you for weighing in. Let's see, Scott, are you next or is it me?
You get to talk about just announcement of next week's session. So if you could do that briefly.
Yes. All right. So yes, there is an optional session next week that we wanted to bring to your attention. And we've, mentioned it before, but this is if you really felt like you got a lot out of this book and want to continue the work on dismantling the doctrine of discovery and bring it to more people in your community. There's two options for that, and we're going to be talking about those options next week. And one of them is something we almost did this time around, and we decided we didn't have enough lead time to get really prepared for it. But Just Faith Ministries, which is a Catholic justice and peace educational type organization, has this wonderful program called The Land Is Not Our Own, seeking repair alongside Indigenous communities. And basically, you might imagine taking what we did, but exploding it out to make a more robust program, a program that is more resourced beyond the book, and also is more of a time commitment. And but we think it's a very, very worthy program, and we think Ed Kale actually has been doing it at his church, so that we might want to check in with him on how it's going. But basically, you do read this book, but there's more. There's guest speakers that come in. There's an immersion experience that you plan, and in our case, maybe it would be at the with the Grand Ronde. There's some spiritual resources that you bring in and so forth. So it looks like a really powerful program. It is. We had 6 1.5-hour session, or 1 hour and 15-minute sessions. This is 8 2-hour sessions. And they really ask you not to cut material, which I was tempted to do, to make it like 1.5 hours. But it's its own thing, And Ed Kale, who many of us know, says that he's done their programs before, and you put more into it, but you also get more out of it than just a book study kind of experience. However, for each group that studies or does the program of 7 to 14 people, you need 2 volunteer facilitators. And so next week, if you're interested at all, and I'm going to put this in the chat for you, but if you would at all be interested in possibly being a co-facilitator and bringing this to your church community, probably sometime next year, maybe, but not immediately, come to the session next week. The other reason to come to the session next week is if you would just simply like to take this and do it as a book study, something similar to what we've done, and you want to think about doing that with your faith community. And so it's just an opportunity to gather. It's an optional opportunity to think about taking this message further and working with more people in your community. So we wanted to just get a sense as to whether it makes sense to have the session. So I hate to put you on the spot, but if you think, you don't have to firmly commit, but if you think you might come next week, could you raise your hand? Okay, 2 people. All right, that's fine. That's worth it, I think, That's great. Scott is going to be leading that session because I will be traveling. But that's awesome, and same time, same place, right, Scott? Unless you want to delay it in case anybody does the wrestling. Okay. Same time, same place, same Zoom link.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. All right, so let's take a little deep breath. We've had a lot of material tonight. Let's try to center. So we'll close our time together with a mashup of the final 3 paragraphs of the book. Our work is not easy, but it is profoundly necessary. The survival of life on Earth depends on our ability to see past the reality designed to diminish us and justify the systems of death. The Holy One revealed in Scripture through the Hebrew prophets and through Jesus is one who is struggling with us and within us to bring about shalom. As Cynthia Mo Labida says, the sacred life-giving source of the cosmos is always luring creation toward the Holy One's intent that all may have life and have it abundantly. Change is possible. We must find the courage to seek, create, and invent a reality consistent with the logic of life. Do not live in fear. Walk in certainty, in the nobility of a mighty spirit in which you share with all creation. It is your right, your birthright, to seek out others to work toward a world you imagine, a world where we are all free. Amen. And thank you all for your participation.
Y'all, it's been great being with you. Thank you so much for showing up and doing the reading and doing the just being part of this little community that we've formed, and blessings on your continued work to dismantle the doctrine of discovery.
And I want to, on behalf of both Spirit of Grace and Eco-Faith Recovery, who have co-sponsored this, I want to extend a big thank you to you, Scott, and to you, Janet, for all. I know, because I live with one of the co-facilitators, that you two have put in hours, and every week you have had an extra, at least an hour meeting, and you've really thought this through and really tried to do the best you could with stewarding our time. So thank you so much for me personally, and on behalf of Spirit of Grace and Eco-Faith, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. Sorry for going 5 minutes over. I'll pause the recording, and if anybody wants to stay on for a little debrief, as we call it in Eco-Faith Recovery, Practice 6, to debrief our action together with this class, we would love to get your thoughts and feedback.